Now let's take a look at some of the stories across the world that have caught our eye in Behind the Headlines. The UN reports that Yemeni children are suffering from record rates of acute malnutrition, putting an entire generation at risk. The New York Times reports on the US Senate confirming US President Donald Trump's nominee, Amy Coney Barrett, to the Supreme Court just 1 week away from Election Day. Facebook will stop accepting new political ads for a week as the social media website's election ban takes effect. That's as The Hill reports. And for the first time ever, NASA has confirmed water on the sunlit surface of the moon. Now, with me to review all of these stories are the journalists Nabila Ramdani and Gary Hudson. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Let's just start with this UN report on child malnutrition in Yemen. Nabila, tell us more.
Well, with coronavirus and all the related horrors we're all facing at the moment, it's very easy to forget about the abject horrors that are happening in other parts of the world. And it's hard to think of a more blighted country than Yemen. The terrifying war there has led to all kinds of other abominations, not least of all a massive refugee crisis and health disasters, including the spread of diseases such as cholera. And now malnutrition has been a huge problem throughout. And in this case, it has worsened amongst children in Yemen because of factors including the coronavirus pandemic and indeed the global economic downturn. Now, malnutrition cases in children aged below 5 has increased about 10% in 2020 to more than 500,000. And acute malnutrition at that age causes irreversible brain damage. So children affected are not just facing short-term hunger, but death or severe handicap. And the war has been going on for 6 years now, and the United Nations has warned of a dire food security crisis with children at the center of it. And as so often in these kinds of situations, the only realistic way of reversing this is by ending the war. But this looks extremely unlikely, given how determined the opposing forces are to keep fighting. And dare I say, it's a fiendishly complicated conflict. And as usual, we find countries such as Britain and America still providing many of the really ferocious armaments that help keep it going. And they are, sure. They're all what we call, sure, disasters, and they're always amongst the worst, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I mean, nearly 6 years of war, a bleak situation painted by this report. Gary, it makes you wonder, a staggering 80% of the population now relying on humanitarian aid. Why famine hasn't officially been declared in Yemen?
Well, that is the great mystery, isn't it? Because it's clearly a famine situation, and yet the UN is declaring these problems, but not declaring it a famine to anyone. Looking at from outside, this is a serious famine. We're talking about 1.4 million children in the south of the country, where they have been able to calculate that 500,000 of them are suffering from severe malnutrition, which will last them, as has been said, for their lifetime. A whole generation has been, ignored by the rest of the international community because they're the ones who are suffering as a result of this war. Saudi Arabia is supposed to be in charge of an international coalition against the Iran-led forces in the north. But all that seems to be happening is a proxy war between Saudi and Iran, and the children and the victims. And the rest of the world is turning a blind eye. OK, we've got problems with the pandemic, but this has been going on for 6 years. That's as long as World War II. And it's horrifying.
All right, turning to the US, amid all the controversy, Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed to the US Supreme Court. She was President Trump's pick. Gary, just remind us why this appointment is so contentious.
Well, it's contentious because normally, in normal times, and these are not normal times, anything to do with Donald Trump is not normal, the convention would be that a new delegate to the Supreme Court would not be appointed so close to an election. But of course, Trump forced it through. She's very much his candidate, and she's very much of the right. The issues that his supporters support, she's very much an advocate for. She's staunchly Catholic, anti-abortion, anti-gay marriage, and she brings the total of right-wingers on the Supreme Court, which has 9 members, to 6 against 3 from the other side. So if it comes to the crunch, and Trump, as he suggested, starts to contest the result of next week's election, she'll be on the side of Donald Trump, and it could lead to a constitutional crisis in the United States.
Nabila, do you agree? Do you think her appointment might give Donald Trump the boost he needs?
Well, yes, indeed. I think Mr. Trump's fellow Republicans voted 52 to 48 to approve this very conservative and indeed very young judge overcoming the unified opposition of Democrats. And her appointment seals for the foreseeable future a 6-3 conservative majority in the Supreme Court. And it's often said that administrations that are facing defeat try to shore up their future legacy by getting their ideological allies in place, especially in crucial bodies such as the Supreme Court. So this may well be what Trump is up to. And amazingly, he could be out of office very shortly, and indeed facing plenty of personal legal problems of his own. And Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden has called the appointment of Judge Barrett rushed and indeed unprecedented. But I don't think Mr. Trump would care much about that. The truth is that Judges Barnett's confirmation in the lifelong post will favor Republicans in politically sensitive cases for potentially decades to come. She's only in her late 40s, which is very young for the job. And in turn, I mean, Judge Barrett has insisted that she's completely independent of Congress and the president, and that is only to be expected, frankly. But I think a crucial element of all this is, of course, that Judge Barrett is replacing the great liberal judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So this will anger Democrats even more.
I mean, speaking of the US election, Facebook is to stop accepting new political ads for a week starting Tuesday. Gary, is this a positive step?
Well, it is, but it's surprising to me, as someone who lives in a country where political advertising is actually not allowed, that they've taken so long to do it. And they've had a ban on political advertising in the run-up to the election for the last week. But this is actually to extend it beyond the election itself into the period post-election, when there may yet be some controversy about the result, as I mentioned earlier. And it seems to me they're trying to wash their hands of any of the kind of allegations which happened last time round in 2016 about, for example, Russia's involvement on social media. So Facebook is spending a lot of money, in fairness, to prevent political advertising getting through. But they're concerned that they could be fueling potentially a civil war, because there are extreme right-wing groups that may rally around Trump if he loses the election but refuses to abdicate his office, which is a serious consideration that could well happen.
Yeah, there was a lot of criticism last time, wasn't there, in the run-up to the election, social media not perhaps handling or not controlling misinformation. Nabila, Twitter doesn't allow political advertising on its platform. Should Facebook? Should others?
Well, I think this is one of those stories which shows how massively important social media has become to the democratic process, and especially at election times. And we all have all the conspiracy theories about how Brexit was delivered by Russian trolls and the like, and many are worried that fake news will help return Donald Trump to the White House. And remember, he is someone who regularly talks about the fake news media, and that's just the mainstream media that he is largely focused on. But Facebook is always being criticized for the fake information it brings to the national and indeed international conversation. And in this case, it is trying to improve effectively its reputation by ending political ads for a week. But I think Facebook has told advertisers that post-election freeze should last about 1 week, but it could go on for longer, as Gary said, if there is confusion about who has won. And this is a reminder that because of the coronavirus pandemic, presidential and congregational races may take longer to call than normal. And this is likely to cause a lot of confusion and indeed antagonism. And I can certainly see Donald Trump kicking up an almighty fuss if he loses, and getting out of the White House could be very hard indeed. Facebook and Twitter have promised to apply labels to any posts claiming electoral victories in a premature way, but this might be hard to face.
OK, lastly to the moon. I'm sure there's a segue between Donald Trump and the moon, but I'm not going there. But are either of you big advocates for space travel or lunar expeditions? Gary?
If it meant sending Donald Trump to the moon, I think I might well be. But obviously that's unlikely, because they're talking about sending another man and the first woman to the moon. I wouldn't trust her chances in a capsule with Donald Trump. But no, the interesting thing, the fascinating thing, is we're actually talking about water that is on a sunlit part of the moon, and it is definitely water. It's not some sort of a compound of hydrogen and oxygen. Previously, they haven't been able to establish that for sure, but now they're saying it's definitely there. And one estimate was that there's enough for, I think it was a cubic metre of lunar soil contained a 12-ounce bottle of water's worth of water. Now, if they can extract it, they don't know quite how it's contained. It might be within a sort of lunar glass created by the explosions of the impact of meteorites, in which case it might be rather difficult. But if they can extract this water, and it is in the quantities they suspect, and they can find it, and that'd be the place to set up your lunar base. That'd be the place to extract oxygen, possibly for breathing, and obviously water for drinking, and even using it to fuel future exploration of other parts of space, because you could separate the hydrogen and oxygen. And what do you got? Rocket fuel. So the potential is amazing.
Yeah, Nabila, this opens up a whole new reality, doesn't it?
Yes, I mean, well, moon on the water is a great romantic concept in terms of literature, isn't it? And indeed music. But this is about water on the moon, which is a lot more scientific, of course. And we also think of water as a meaning of life. But of course, there has never been any sign of lunar life. But what this discovery does, in layman's term, if you like, is that astronauts on future missions pushing into space can stop off and resupply on the moon. And orbiting spacecrafts have already found indications of ice in large and inaccessible craters near the moon's poles, and cameras have also captured what looks like actual water on the moon's surface. Now, NASA has detected a chemical signature that is unambiguously H2O by measuring the wavelengths of sunlight reflecting off the moon's surface. And what needs to be done now is for someone to go and collect some. And it was, of course, a long, long time that man first walked on the moon. And this just shows how much of it is still there to explore, really.
I'm going to be put a negative question to you, Gary. Is this something that taxpayers should be paying for? Should we leave it to private enterprise?
I personally think that any exploration beyond this planet, which we know is perilously close to using up all its resources and will lead to the demise of mankind, any exploration should be funded internationally. And I don't think private corporations should be left to do the job, because obviously they'd have profit in mind, whereas really, I mean, it's for the benefit of all mankind, isn't it?
OK, lovely. We're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank both of our guests, Nabila Ramdani and Gary Hudson. Thanks so much to you both. That's it from this edition of Behind the Headlines.